There's a rule at Wimbledon that almost nobody talks about. It's not about the grass. It's not about the strawberries. It's not even about tennis. It's about what you're allowed to say and what you're not. Because when you sit in that royal box, you don't speak. Not really. Every word is filtered, approved, managed. Your face is watched. Your reactions are photographed. Your opinions belong to the institution, not to you. But your outfit? That one, somehow, they couldn't fully control. And two women understood that better than anyone. Diana Spencer first sat in that royal box in 1981. She was 20 years old, not yet married, barely allowed to exist in public without a chaperone. She wore something quiet, something careful. Something that said, "I am not a threat. I am exactly what you need me to be." 45 years later, Catherine, Princess of Wales, walks into the same box as patron of the All England Club. She chooses her dress weeks in advance. She knows exactly what every color, every cut, every designer label will communicate by the time the cameras finish their close-up. Same venue, same eyes watching. Completely different women. But here's what I want you to think about as we go through this together. These two weren't just making fashion choices. They were making the only kind of statement they were allowed to make. And once you learn how to read it, you will never watch a royal appearance the same way again. If that sounds like something worth understanding, stay with me. Because we're starting in 1981, and we're starting with a dress that looked like nothing and meant everything. Let's go back to that first appearance, July 1981. Diana is sitting next to Charles in the royal box, and the world is already obsessed with her. The engagement had been announced in February. The wedding is 3 weeks away. Every photographer in London wants her face. And she shows up in something that almost disappears. A pale, muted blouse, a modest skirt. Minimal jewelry, hair tucked, shoulders covered, posture correct. She looks like someone who has been briefed, and briefed again, on how not to take up too much space. Now, was that her taste? Maybe partly, but Diana was also a 20-year-old woman walking into one of the most scrutinized institutions on earth, and she was doing what every woman in that position learns to do first: shrink. Not because she was weak, because shrinking was the price of entry. The early 80s appearances follow the same logic. Pretty, but not flashy. Coordinated with Charles in ways that communicate unity. We are a team. We are stable. There is nothing to worry about here. The outfits say, "I understand my role. I will not embarrass anyone. I am grateful to be here." This is what compliance looks like when it's dressed up beautifully. And the thing is, the public loved it, because it matched the story they'd been sold. The shy kindergarten assistant who became a princess. The fairy tale. You can't disrupt a fairy tale while you're still in the middle of living it. But look more closely at the photographs from 1985, 1986, 1987. Something is starting to shift. The colors get a fraction brighter, the silhouettes a touch more self-assured. Diana is still playing by the rules, but she's beginning to understand that the rules are a language, and if you speak a language fluently enough, eventually you can start to bend it. By 1989, 1990, there are moments at Wimbledon where she's laughing in a way that isn't performed, where she's leaning forward in genuine excitement at a rally, where the outfit still says appropriate, but her eyes say something else entirely. She's still inside the system, but she's mapping its walls. And in 1992, everything changes. I'll tell you exactly how in a moment, but if you're already seeing what I'm seeing, drop a comment below. Because the women who watch this kind of shift in real time and recognize it are usually the ones who've lived some version of it themselves. In December 1992, the palace announced that Charles and Diana were separating. Officially, nothing had changed. She was still Princess of Wales. She still had her titles, her duties, her schedule. She was still expected to show up, smile, and perform the role. And show up she did. Wimbledon 1993. Diana arrives and she is wearing red. Not a soft red. Not a diplomatic, easy-to-ignore red. A deliberate, saturated, look-at-me red. Shoulders more open than before. Posture not careful, confident. And she is alone. No Charles beside her. Just Diana, in a color that the institution she married into would never have chosen for her, watching tennis and refusing to disappear. The photographers went wild. And Diana knew they would, because by this point, she had become something the palace hadn't anticipated. A woman who understood the media better than the media understood itself. She knew that a red dress on that particular body in that particular box would travel around the world by morning. She knew that Diana alone at Wimbledon was not a story about loneliness, it was a story about survival. The outfit was the press release. As the 90s progress, watch what happens to her Wimbledon wardrobe. The hemlines rise, subtly but measurably. The colors become more personal and less institutional. She starts wearing designers who weren't on the palace-approved list. She wears things that fit her body the way she wanted them to fit, not the way a stylist hired to protect an image would have fitted them. And then there are the appearances with William and Harry. This is perhaps the most sophisticated move of all. Because Diana didn't just change what she wore, she changed who she sat with and what that image communicated. A mother, with her sons, at a beloved British institution. Not a broken marriage, not a royal scandal. A family. Her family. The one thing the system couldn't take from her, and she made sure the world saw it every summer in perfect, sunlit detail. By 1997, her last Wimbledon, Diana had completed a transformation that took 16 years and cost her almost everything. The woman who arrived in 1981 trying to take up as little space as possible was now one of the most photographed, most discussed, most recognizable humans on the planet. And she had done a significant part of that work without saying a single word. Just cloth, just color, just the quiet, devastating intelligence of a woman who learned that when they silence your voice, you find another one. That's the first half of this story. The second half begins in 2008 with a young woman who had watched all of this unfold on television as a child and who walked into Wimbledon as a guest for the first time, having already understood the lesson Diana never got to finish teaching. Catherine Middleton first appeared in the Wimbledon Royal Box in 2008. She was not yet married to William. She was not yet a princess. She was, technically speaking, a guest. And she wore something so carefully calibrated that it almost looked effortless, which, if you understand how this world works, you know means it was anything but. A neat, classic dress, appropriate colors, nothing that would generate a headline for the wrong reasons. She sat straight, laughed at the right moments, applauded with genuine enthusiasm, and left without incident. The tabloids called it understated elegance. What it actually was a masterclass in introduction. Kate wasn't announcing herself, she was proposing herself, quietly, confidently, on her own terms. She had watched what happened to women who arrived too loudly in this world. She had also watched what happened to women who arrived too quietly and never found their way back out. She was threading a needle that Diana spent years learning even existed. Fast forward through the years that follow. The engagement in 2010. The wedding in 2011. And then Wimbledon, year after year, as Kate gradually, deliberately expands her presence. The colors get more considered, not brighter for the sake of brightness, but more intentional. Navy that signals authority. Green that signals approachability. Yellow that says, I am not afraid to be seen, and I am also not asking for your permission. Watch the silhouettes evolve. In the early years as Princess of Wales, the shapes are classic, almost conservative. She is building trust before she builds identity. Then, somewhere around 2016, when she becomes patron of the All England Club, something shifts. The patron role matters here more than people realize. Because patron isn't a ceremonial title, it's a working one. Kate now has a reason to be at Wimbledon that belongs entirely to her, not as William's wife, not as a royal ornament, but as the person responsible for the relationship between the crown and one of Britain's most beloved institutions. She has a function, and function gives you a different kind of posture. Watch her first Wimbledon as patron. She wears white. Now, white at Wimbledon is not a neutral choice. White is the color of the players. White is the dress code of the courts. Wearing white in the royal box is a way of saying, I am not above this. I am part of this. I belong here not because of who I married, but because of what I do. It's a single color doing about 15 sentences of work. And this is where Kate's fluency becomes extraordinary. Because Diana learned the language of royal dressing through pain, through years of trial and error, through a marriage that was fracturing in public, through the desperate creativity of a woman running out of options. Kate learned it through observation, through patience, through what can only be described as an almost architectural approach to building a public identity brick by brick, season by season, Wimbledon by Wimbledon. By 2026, when Kate walks out to present the trophies, and the cameras find her, and the crowd responds with that particular warmth that you can't manufacture, she is wearing something that will be analyzed, copied, and referenced for years. Not because it's the most beautiful thing ever worn at Wimbledon, but because it is precisely, exactly, perfectly her. No accident, no coincidence, no stylist making a random call on a Tuesday morning. Every stitch is a sentence, and she has been writing this paragraph for 18 years. If you've made it this far and you're not yet subscribed, this is the kind of content we make here. Not gossip, not rumor. The real architecture of how these women operate. Hit subscribe so you don't miss what's coming next. So here's what we have. Two women, the same venue, decades apart, both operating inside a system that was not built for them, that did not ask for their opinions, that expected them to be decorative and grateful and quiet. And both of them, in completely different ways, from completely different positions, refused. Diana refused loudly, eventually. She arrived soft and left blazing, and the cost of that transformation was staggering. She didn't get to finish the story. But she left behind something more valuable than a completed narrative. She left behind a blueprint, a proof of concept. Evidence that even inside the most controlled institution on Earth, a woman could find a frequency that was entirely her own and broadcast on it, season after season, until the whole world was tuned in. Kate refused differently, quietly, structurally, over a very long time. She took the blueprint Diana left, not consciously perhaps, not as a strategy written down somewhere, but absorbed, the way you absorb the lessons of women who came before you when you're paying close enough attention. She built something Diana never had: stability, continuity, a Wimbledon presence that now spans nearly 2 decades and shows no signs of fracturing. Different survival, equal intelligence. And this is what I think is worth sitting with, after everything we've covered today. We talk about Diana and Kate as if they're opposites, the tragic one and the steady one, the rebel and the institution. But look at them through the lens of what they wore. Really look, and what you see isn't opposites. What you see is a conversation across time. A woman who was forced to invent a language passing it, silently, to a woman who had the space to perfect it. The dress that said, "I am trying to survive this," answered, 40 years later, by the dress that said, "I have." That's not fashion. That's history wearing clothes. And every summer, when Wimbledon opens, and the cameras find that royal box, and we all lean forward a little to see what she's wearing this year, we are participating in that history whether we know it or not. Now we know. If this changed how you'll watch Wimbledon this year, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. And if you have a woman in your life who would see herself in this story, send it to her. That's exactly the kind of person this was made for.